Please welcome to the stage, Director of National Solution Providers and Integrators from Intel, Stephen Darrah.
All right. Let's see, is the mic on? All right, can you guys hear me okay? So, welcome back from the break, everybody. So, just show of hands. Who went out on the field yesterday and realized they still had 4 years of college eligibility left? And we're like, I'm going to try out for the Rutgers football team. Anybody? No? I did that last year. I went home, told my daughters, I'm going to go play for Rutgers. I caught one pass in the end zone, and it was pretty amazing. Hey, so I appreciate everybody. First off, I want to thank SHI for having me today. And mostly I want to thank all of you for coming here to listen to this. So I thought it was interesting. We were talking about the AI PC, and it is a bit of it's hype, a lot of hype right now. So I appreciate everybody listening to my perspective. Without you, we couldn't do what we do, so thank you in advance. So today I'm going to hit, over the next, I guess, not really 44 minutes. It's going to be a little shorter than that. But I'm going to hit 3 questions. So, one, are we really at an inflection point? You know, I think about the past 2 decades, the internet, cloud computing, total inflection points. They're fads. They're going to go away. Don't worry about it. Just kidding. But I think about other things that we talked about. Remember the Segway? Show of hands. Anybody remember the Segway? And I know we got Microsoft, Google in here, but the HoloLens, the metaverse, all that stuff, everybody's like, it's going to change the way we communicate. Not seeing it just yet, but pretty cool technology. So we're going to explore, is this hype? Is this reality? The second thing, which really requires all of you, is what applications and use cases will be valuable to users and IT? And we need your feedback. And I'll talk a little bit about how this is an evolution, not a revolution. And then the last thing, I'm going to ask this question right now, and I hope I can see everybody raise their hand. Does sustainability really matter? Just show of hands. Let's start off with this. Let's just get this on the table. Does sustainability really matter? All right. So when I talk about this, I'm actually going to talk about this in a little bit of a different way. Everybody always talks about the environment. What I'm going to do is explore a little bit of how do we make the product. I'll talk a little bit about how we operate it, but also, obviously, how we recycle and dispose of it. So this is important to me. So these are the topics today we're going to hit. All right. So I think it was last year, Pat Gelsinger, our CEO, this is way before anybody was talking about AI PC, but analysts asked Pat, our CEO, he goes, so what do you think the impact of the AI PC will be on the industry? Pat sits back in his chair. It was just like his mind just exploded. He's like, this is going to be a Centrino moment. Now, show of hands. Who has any idea what Centrino is? Anybody? Show of hands? Couple? God, I'm old. Come on, team. He said this, well, just a little background. Centrino was our wireless product, which, by the way, Pat worked on as a product manager back in 2002. And what's interesting is what we did is we integrated Wi-Fi into a platform in 2002. Now, I'm older than a lot of you. I'm Gen X. Matt was saying something about Gen X earlier, so I'm proudly Gen X. But I remember the first time I saw Wi-Fi in an office environment. My mind was blown. I was like, where are the wires to this PC? How are you surfing the internet? It was really, really fascinating to me. But within a period of 1 year, 99% of all PCs had Wi-Fi attached. That's amazing. 99% of all PCs. Is it hard to believe that a tablet notebook didn't have Wi-Fi before? But that was a true inflection point. And it got me thinking, what are some of those other inflection points that have happened over the last 20 years? Just, you know, anybody want to throw out an inflection point that happened over the last 20 years in end user computing? All right, so none. All right. Okay. All right, so I did what every good sales guy does. I hit ChatGPT up. I already knew the answer, but I just wanted to verify it. And that's the important thing with ChatGPT. Verify your answers. So there's really 2. Form factor, okay? Form factor, in 2010, what happened? You can see a picture of it up here. Apple launched the iPad, which meant my kids had a babysitter, which was amazing. But they launched the iPad, and our CEO at the time put this incredible effort in place called Ultrabook. And we defined a new class of PC. And within like 2 years, we had cut the weight of the PC in half, from 7 pounds to half of that. We'd also doubled the performance, and it radically transformed the work environment that we're in today. Think about this. And if anybody was in the work environment in 2010, I remember when this happened. Devices got so cool and sexy, CIOs were like, oh, well, we're going to come up with this thing called BYOD. I know there's a couple CIOs in here that were like, BYOD, yep, we're doing that. It was a fancy way of saying saving money. But what happened, their IT support staff was like, this is a nightmare. Then basically they refreshed everybody, BOD died. But the other thing that happened, we transformed workspaces. I worked at Intel in our office in Santa Clara at the time. They did this fun thing where they put a little sticky tab on your cube for every day you weren't there. If you got 3 sticky tabs, you lost your cube. All because the PC was cut in half in size, weight, doubled the performance. True inflection point. The next one, I don't like to talk about it because I think it's kind of negative, but we'll hit it for a second. The pandemic, definitely an inflection point. I think this is a little different, though, because overnight, we saw voice, video collaboration, all of this stuff. We had technologies for years. Now, all of a sudden, we adopted those things. Telemedicine. I remember when my dad was sick during the pandemic. You could not get my parents to use a PC. When they told them they were allowed to use a telemedicine call to do a visit, oh my gosh, it was like they hit the lottery. They were like, log into a PC, see a doctor? I mean, they were on that thing every day with that doctor. It's crazy. True inflection points, and now we're here. Is it hype? Is it not hype? There's a lot of stuff that we can do. What we've effectively done with this AI PC is we've taken these huge, large language models in the cloud. Now we're able to run those locally. We're able to do things like text to image. You're able to do things like, I love like personal assistant. Thank you, Microsoft and Copilot. Everybody in my team knows I'm terrible at taking notes. Thank you. It's the only way you're ever going to get the action items from me. But analysts are saying we're going to see as much as 25% improvement in productivity. 25%. That is more, I was a finance major, just so we're clear here. That's more than a day a week of productivity gains. I guess the question I'd have for everybody is, can we afford not to explore this and take advantage of it? So that's what we're going to hit on today. And I think the last thing I'll say is, these inflections, it's really important. It's not just the technology, but it's the impactful benefit that drives that. And I'd use that example of collaboration. I mentioned telemedicine. Within the 6 months after the pandemic hit, video collaboration went up 21x. 21x. We were using it in 2010. 10 years later, we actually started using it. So that's what we're going to explore today. All right. I'll build this slide out. So, and thank you. With all this complexity, are you also ready for Windows 11? My friends over at Microsoft are going to talk a little bit more about this, but just want to kind of underscore some of the things that have happened at Intel with Windows 11. So a couple things. First, in 2023, we launched our Intel vPro platform. That's our first platform that really is optimized for Windows 11. So we're ready. In December 2023, we launched Intel Core Ultra, which is our first AI PC. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And then later on this year, we're going to launch Intel Lunar Lake. Somebody was talking about TOPS earlier. Team, I'm going to share with you a dirty little secret. Not every application requires 40 TOPS. Most applications use 2 to 5 TOPS. So Meteor Lake, which we launched in December, is going to be the majority of the platforms out there in the industry. Lunar Lake, if you've got somebody that really needs to crunch some data, which launches later this year, is going to have 60 platform TOPS and 100 system TOPS. And now it's getting all confusing with these TOPS, but let's just say that's a lot. If your users can take advantage of that, maybe buy them a workstation too. But we're ready. So what is an AI PC? I think the team earlier definitely hit this. So it's a GPU, a CPU, and an NPU. That's a lot of PUs, I know. That's a joke where you guys laugh? Oh, okay, you got that. My kids thought that was funny, by the way, and they're 20 and 21. Great dad joke. All right, so the CPU first. I mean, a lot of these things, and I think the panel talked about it, are going to get processed on the CPU. So I think, you know, Excel, all your traditional applications, the GPU, video, voice, graphics, all that stuff is going to still rely on that. The last piece of this is obviously the NPU, the neural processing unit. So, you know, the function of the neural processing unit is to be able to take these AI, ML workloads and run those in a sustained way using very, very, very low power. And that's important. You'd drain your battery if we didn't have this NPU on there when you're running things like some advanced algorithms for security and AI. All right. I forgot to say this, but the most important thing here, since this is like a long room, I'm running a track meet here, so sorry about that. Just trying to hit both sides here. But the most important thing is application development, and we'll talk about that here in a second. This is great hardware, but people, we'll send them a demo unit, and they'll open it up, and they'll be like, do magic. Guess what? There's no magic without the application, so thank you, Adobe, thank you, Microsoft, thank you, Google, thank you, everybody that's writing these applications. So the important thing, though, from our perspective is, at Intel, we're still selling this. Intel Core is a CPU. It's delivered on top of our vPro platform, and I just want to mention this real quick. So vPro is our standard enterprise platform. Hopefully everybody knows about this platform, but we deliver stability, which is important. We lock down the drivers for 15 months, so there's no changes. While that doesn't seem exciting, that is really important when you're like, hey, my Wi-Fi doesn't work. But this is a huge benefit to IT operations. Sustainability, and we'll talk about in a little bit. Performance, remote manageability. This ability to be able to push server-like manageability to the edge has become a big deal. I don't know how many people know that we have this feature, but basically, if you have a vPro platform, we can manage it like a server. If you can't boot an OS, we can actually power that system up in your home, do some diagnostics, and actually look at it even if you can't boot to the OS. So that has become something that a lot of big corporations, especially those that are highly distributed during the pandemic and following it, have really started to take advantage of. And then the last thing is AI. And the one thing I will mention here is that 80% of the platforms in the industry are based on Intel. And the reason I mention this is because of the software ecosystem enablement we'll talk about here in a second. Of those, 60 to 70% are actually based on vPro. So math, again, my specialty, I believe that's about 50% of devices have this technology in the industry. Bless you. All right. So what are the benefits of the AI PC and what are those use cases? So video conferencing. I mean, Microsoft's talked about this. Obviously, you can do eye tracking and all that stuff. That's great. Here's what I challenge everybody in the room to do, though. Take a look at a 4-year-old PC, run a new Intel Core Ultra side by side. We've run a couple video conferencing application kind of demo videos. You know, I think about mine, my face is halfway cut off because of the virtual background. You know, the noise reduction isn't quite right. It is night and day. 8K TV versus a console TV from 1970. It is a big difference. The reason why this is a big difference, how many people spend 50% of their day on video conference? How many people have people in their organization that never get on video? Are you really working? Probably a lot of those too. Yeah, but I mean, if this is one of the fundamental tools that we're driving the industry, going from a console TV to an 8K is a pretty big jump in productivity. I personally cannot talk to people unless I can see them. That's why people are becoming uncomfortable in the front row as I look at them, right? So, second is IT telemetry. And CIOs, this is really what they're saying, is IT telemetry is probably one of the most important things. You can take this NPU, you can run algorithms in the background, you can look and see, hey, is my battery gonna fail? Hey, do I have a software complexity issue? Things like that. But this is a really important thing. The third thing, which I think is super important, is productivity. Yet again, like video collaboration, I spend my entire day in meetings, taking notes, sending action items, creating PowerPoint presentations, talking to folks like you, which is fun. Having an application that saves 25% of my time on those critical tasks, which is what we talked about at the beginning, is an incredibly important thing. Content creation. How many people in the room have spent time trying to find just the right image? I've spent hours on this a couple times. Like, how do I convey this meaning in a PowerPoint presentation? Text to image is one of the greatest things ever. I mean, you know, for my mom's, for Mother's Day, I was like, went out to ChatGPT, boom, hit the thing, you know, what's a happy birthday customized message for my mom? Boom, there it is, send it to her, it's awesome. Think about that in work. I mean, I create a lot of images. This is really, really helpful. Actually, yeah, each one of these images was created using text to image. But Adobe's got a great product out there, Microsoft, obviously, DALL-E, but really a big benefit. And then we've got security. You know, there's a recent study I was reading by Stanford that 88%, we all know this stat, but I just think it's fascinating. 88% of all IT issues, security issues, are created because of the end user. Why can we just not click as end users? That's what I want to ask. But one of the things that we're using the NPU for is to run real-time algorithms in the background so you can identify cryptojacking, phishing, malware attacks before a user clicks on it. And we're working with a couple big security companies to enable this feature. And one of the things the CTO of this one security company said to me that I thought was just so simple and clear: security is best not felt. You shouldn't feel the impact of security on your system. If you open up like Perfmon or something on your system, I shouldn't see this huge CPU and GPU spike because I'm running security. And that's what we're able to do with an NPU. Is it sexy? It's not sexy, but I'll tell you what, it can keep an organization pretty secure. The last thing on here is the industry verticals, and this is really where we need all of you. You know, we look at industries like healthcare, where we're testing and looking at using the NPU to be able to look at maybe there's drug complications and things like that, you know, interactions. Legal, I mean, you think about in the legal industry, being able to summarize, create a brief in a fraction of the time that a paralegal is normally able to do that. I mean, there's real productivity gains. I've got a buddy who is a consultant in the legal industry, and he's like, oh man, they are really interested in Copilot. Now, there's a lot of issues with it, but, you know, doing that, but it's definitely an opportunity. The other one is education. Teachers are using it to create lesson plans. We're actually working with a company called Khan Academy. So if anybody's familiar with Khan Academy, rather than just going in and saying, show me the answer, it actually takes you through an online kind of process to fix this using the NPU. So really cool technology. And I think actually Microsoft just had an announcement with them on that. And then you've got, you know, other industries like manufacturing, and et cetera. But this is really where we are right now. We're figuring out all these big use cases. How do we enable those? And then now we're getting into how we adopt using these on these industry-specific use cases. All right, now everybody in the room can call BS on this, because you know what? You can do all this stuff in the cloud. True? You can do almost all that stuff in the cloud. This is where it gets different. We all, hopefully everybody knows what a RAG model is now. The beauty of the AI PC are these 4 bullets below. And I don't want anybody to leave here without really understanding this. I've spent a year in hundreds of conversations working with our engineers, and I can say these 4 things combined with these 6, 7 use cases up there are really what makes the difference. So first, greater relevance. I mean, back in my day, we called it personalization, but now, you know, it's context. You know, back when the internet started, people probably don't remember this, but when you used to search on the internet for a restaurant, it'd be like, here's restaurants all over the world. That's not very helpful to me. So this is personalization on steroids. I love context. And, you know, the ability to take these large language models up in the cloud, run those locally, and provide context based on everything that's stored, downloaded, indexed on your PC, it's pretty amazing. Think of this. I want to create an image of my dog wearing a superhero costume, because I got a picture of my dog on my PC. Hey, tell me, make a reservation at my favorite restaurant. I'm not going to kid you. I don't want ChatGPT to know my dog's name. I don't want it to know my favorite restaurant, but I do want that information on my PC. That relevance, to me, is what makes this valuable to everybody here in the room. Privacy. This is going to be a big issue. I mean, we all heard, Microsoft. I think Rob's going to talk about this later, but with Recall. Recall is a great product, and all of a sudden everybody's like, "Whoa, you can see everything on the PC?" I don't know about that. But that ability to contain information locally and not share it with the cloud is a huge deal, especially when we get into highly regulated industries. Places like healthcare and legal and things like that. The third one, which is incredibly important, is lower cost. How many people, let's see, how many data centers do you think are in the United States? Just guess, people. Come on. All right, 5,000, 5,325. That was a great answer back there. I wish I had a gift card to give out right now. So, okay, 5,325 data centers in the US. There's a couple countries that are not allowing new data centers to be built. Ireland, Singapore, there's a couple other places. I think China has some embargoes on it. I was listening to a really interesting interview with Sam Altman, and Sam Altman was talking about how they didn't have the capacity in the cloud to be able to deliver the user experience they wanted. I don't know if it was ChatGPT 4, but anyways, so they were slowing down the response. And now if you go to like Bing search, they're like deep search is 30 seconds. But there's a reality that we can't keep building out the cloud. I'm sure everybody's seen at the same rate. If we do, and I'll talk about this in a second, we will melt the polar ice caps. I don't know if anybody saw Jensen get up on stage talking about how many gigawatts his next GPU platform is going to be. Power consumption is a real issue. And when you start looking at these data centers, I remember about 10 years ago, everybody was like, we're not going to let liquid cooled in our data center. Now they're like, please submerge the entire thing. Let's put it in Lake Michigan. I mean, it's crazy. And when you start to think of the cost then, that every time you put that little request in there, show me pictures of my dog wearing a tutu. I don't know what it is. It's between 7 cents and 36 cents to run that. The cost and the economics of continuing to run this stuff in the cloud does not work. We have to start bringing it down to the PC and down to the edge. The last one I threw on here, a little less exciting, longer battery life. Who wants 8 hours of battery life? I do. I want to be on a plane and not have to plug in. Oh man, the outlet doesn't work. So, but like I said though, I want everybody here to leave today knowing these are the big use cases we're going after, and these are the benefits of running it locally on your PC. All right. Next thing I'll say is this. This is not evolution, or it's not revolution, it's evolution. So one of the things I talk a lot about with my team is that hardware comes first, and people develop on hardware. I showed the iPad at the beginning. The iPad came out in 2010. Guess when Apple Maps? Actually, I hope there's not somebody from Apple here to fact check me. Hopefully. Okay. Guess when Apple Maps came out? 2012. Now, that does not mean I didn't use the iPad to babysit my kids because it didn't have GPS on it. But the hardware comes first, the applications and the usage models follow. One of my favorite examples of this is this picture. Anybody know what this is? I think this is it's a Cruise autonomous driving vehicle. So it's interesting, there's about 20 to 30,000 autonomous driving vehicles on the market, truly autonomous. Like I remember Elon saying, your car's gonna pick you up from the valet, and not true. There's 20 to 30,000 of them. If you're in San Francisco, you can take an Uber, it's autonomous. But does this mean this car could not detect the difference between dry cement and wet cement? Does that mean that all AI is worthless? All autonomous driving features are worthless because you cannot trust a Cruise, a Waymo, an Uber taxi, any of those things? My answer is, do you realize there are 50 million cars that have AI on them today, 50 million. And I have been the beneficiary of this. I'll tell you a quick story. I got a new car a couple years ago, and I was driving down the road. And I decided it'd be a great idea to log into my PC because I couldn't connect to CarPlay while I was driving. This is a bad idea, people. Okay? I'm driving down the road, my brakes slam on. PC, bam, up against the dashboard. Crack the screen to it. That is AI. I am incredibly happy that they took this technology. My car that uses it was able to automatically brake because I was being an absolute idiot, and it stopped my car about 15 feet short of the car in front of me. Absolutely great. And I was probably going 50, 60 miles an hour. This is not recorded, right? Oh, God. I didn't put up the legal disclaimer at the beginning. Please omit this piece. All right. All right. So, but the point here is we've shipped 40 million AI PCs at Intel already. We're going to ship, 7 million. We'll ship about 40 million this year. Next year, we'll ship about 100 million total. These capabilities are out there, and we're actively developing them. We don't know how we're going to take advantage of them. I saw the woman that was on stage earlier, and I thought I would take a real quick moment to share a video of how we're using, really using the question, what if? What can you do with this technology to show one of the ways that we're using the AI PC to provide greater accessibility to people with deafness. And there's about 500,000 people in the United States who actually use American Sign Language to communicate. But you can imagine, she was talking about in the pandemic how difficult that was with people wearing masks. So I thought this was a really interesting use case to show how we leverage the AI PC to create this bi-directional communication with somebody using ASL. So take a look real quick.
It recognizes your hand motions and translates them into English. Large language model. Is that correctly? I really appreciate being able to communicate with developing the software.
All right. So I saw that. I thought that was a really cool use. And, we use that term possibility thinking. This is the idea of possibility thinking. How can you create greater accessibility using this technology? And I mean, I thought that was a really, really good example to underscore that. So, all right. The only way this happens is if we enable the ecosystem. So Intel has a very rich history of enabling the ecosystem. Just over the past decade, 2 decades, I mean, Wi-Fi, Unix to Linux in the data center. But we've got our AI PC accelerator program that we've established. We're working today with hundreds, probably going to be thousands of ISVs pretty soon. Almost every major ISV is working with us across productivity applications, text to image, collaboration, security. So almost every single one is working with us to take advantage of this NPU. And I will say, they have to specifically enable their application to be able to move the workloads around to be able to do these things. So it's, like I said earlier, it's not just magic out of the box. It takes some work. So that's one of the reasons why I mentioned today we're 80% of the market. So a lot of these ISVs are leading with Intel as their partner to enable a lot of these capabilities. But I'd encourage you to please, if you have an application that you want to find out what we're doing, please reach out to me. I've got my team at the back. They can certainly address that. All right. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was sustainability. I think everybody raised their hand on this one, right? All right. Let's hope so. Okay. So this isn't a funny topic. This is more of a personal thing for me, but I think this is incredibly important. You know, sustainability isn't just about the environment. It's about how we build, how do we support the communities that we're in, and how do we care for the environment moving forward. So I want to hit on what we're doing to really bring back manufacturing in the US. Number two is the environmental impact. And I talked about that earlier. I don't want to melt the polar ice caps. I've seen those pictures of the polar bears that are standing on a little, ice. It does not make me happy. We have to do something about this. So we'll talk about that. And then the last thing is just everybody here in the room. I mean, you're the ones that make this happen. I always think it's funny. My wife's in IT, and she's always like, you sales guys, you sell us these ideas, but we're the ones that have to implement it. I realize that because I hear it every night when I go home. But so a lot of people probably remember this, but back in 2000, there was a CPU shortage. Everybody was buying everything they could get their hands on. But at the time, our CEO, Pat Gelsinger, got together with a couple other CPU vendors and went to Washington and say, hey, listen, we got a big issue here. We've got the shortage of PCs that is really limiting our ability to be able to pivot in this really dynamically environment. We got to do something about it. And this is crazy. But in the 1990s, and I'm starting to lose my voice, so apologies. In the 1990s, 30-some%, I think it was like 37% of all CPUs were manufactured in the US. Today, 12%. Europe, it was 44%. 44%. Today, it's like 12. Not, actually, I think it's 9. Yeah, 9%. We have a goal to shift and bring back 50% of the CPU capacity back to the US and Europe by 2030. It's a pretty big moonshot. But by Pat working with the administration, they were able to pass the CHIPS Act. The US government, through a bipartisan Congress, I always feel like I'm running for office when I talk about this, but through the bipartisan Congress, passed the CHIPS Act, which was basically an $80 billion reinvestment to build and manufacture chips, design, build, and manufacture chips here in the US. So this is particularly impactful to me because I'm from the great state of Ohio, which is where one of our fabs is. Now, we have committed over the last 2 years to $100 billion worth of investments in production and manufacturing capacity across the United States. Ohio, Arizona, New Mexico, Oregon, and then several projects in EMEA, or in Europe. But to me, this is hugely impactful. My dad grew up in Martins Ferry, Ohio, which was a town of about 100,000 at one point. It's probably about 6 now. It's kind of sad. The house he grew up in actually became a meth house. And I remember looking at pictures, and this whole area of Ohio was decimated because it was based on coal, strip mining, all these different industries which no longer exist. So when Pat announced this, I did get a nomination for governor of Ohio because my parents still live there, so that was pretty cool. I'm kidding. But so every time I go back there, they're like, oh, Steven, Mr. Intel. But yeah, it's pretty cool. But this fab that we're building in Ohio represents $20 billion initial investment, more than 3,000 jobs, tech jobs that are going to come to Ohio. So I've got a lot of resumes from people from Ohio now. But these jobs are $150,000 a year on average. These are high-paying tech jobs, and then over 7,000 construction jobs. So this is changing the landscape of the communities where we're putting these. I mean, Intel is one of the largest employers in Arizona, Oregon. We probably will be in Ohio at some point. But when I talk about sustainability, though, bringing back this manufacturing and putting it in the United States or Europe so we can balance the global supply chain. A lot of people don't realize this, but China does not want our technology. They do not want, if you read the news, they will not use our technology anymore. There is a war here, and if you ask a lot of politicians, one of the most important things from a national security standpoint is making sure we're reinvesting in the United States and some of our allies like in Europe. So I want everybody to leave here and not underestimate the impact of this. The other piece of this is not only building a global supply chain that's sustainable, but the other piece is making sure we're doing it in a green way. And, when you think about green energy in Intel, it's, we're an ingredient company. It's a little bit of a different take on green. And I was thinking about this big investment that we're making in Ohio, and I really just thought about one simple question. Would I want to live by an Intel factory? Would you want to live by one? And the answer to that is yes. And I was thinking about this as I was driving down to Ohio to visit my mom. I'm in Chicago. I'm driving through Gary, Indiana. And my apologies if anybody's from Gary. This isn't a slight, but this is a reality. But Gary, Indiana used to be a huge town. It's on Lake Michigan. It's beautiful beaches. But Gary, Indiana, unfortunately, there's like 160,000 people at one point. Now it's about 60,000 people. I look at the area of Gary, and it's dominated by old manufacturing. And the air is very hard to breathe. The sky is a little bit yellow. And you look, it's economically, it's depressed. And I think about that contrast of what Gary is, that was built on these traditional manufacturing industries, and what we're doing at Intel. And I think I wanted to just highlight these as we wrap up. But Intel has some pretty audacious goals. So one, we want to use 100% renewable electricity by 2030. Today, we're at 93%. Number two, we want to be net water positive by 2030. You know what that means? We want to create more clean water that comes into our facility than goes out. Here's a crazy thing. We create 107%, which means we actually deliver 7% more clean water back to the community than what we take in. Zero waste to a landfill by 2030. Today, we're at 6.4%, and then net zero carbon emissions by 2040. The other thing, at Intel, we've been gender pay neutral since 2019, and we invest about $2 billion a year back into minority-owned businesses. So this is the future of manufacturing, and when you're buying your PC, I want to make sure that everybody thinks about, it's not just, these things matter. These things absolutely matter. So just to wrap up today, are we really at an inflection point with end-user computing? I mean, I feel like we are. This is an evolution, not a revolution, though. What are the applications that will, what are the applications and uses that will be valuable to users in IT? That's going to require everybody in this room to be able to take advantage of that. And then the last thing is, does sustainability really matter? And I'll just say on this, if you care about the environment, you care about your kids, you're obviously incredibly intelligent people, definitely make sure you make this a priority in your organization. So with that, I just want to say thank you for a little longer than I thought, but for giving me a little time to share Intel's story, our strategy, and talk about these incredible inflection points we have coming ahead of us. Thank you.